The Chicago Bulls are a really confusing team so far this season because they have been really surprising offensively and relatively competitive despite a really bad defense. And yet their two best players are two guys that realistically shouldn't even be on this team, in Nikola Vucevic and Zach LaVine. And that makes no sense to me. I mean, this is a team that I feel like is in a position where they want to tank this year. They want to be bad, right? And yet they are winning more than you would expect they would, playing better than you would expect they would, and it's been because of two guys who are playing really, really well, good basketball, but should probably have been traded at this point and will almost certainly be traded at some point this year, especially Vucevic. I mean, Vucevic is having legitimately the best season of his career to this point. It is pretty remarkable what Nikola Vucevic has done to this point in the season. Had another absolutely massive game tonight in a win over admittedly a Wemby-less Spurs. But still, the Bulls are 10-13, solidly in the play-in race in the East. And I'm not sure they're doing themselves any favors by playing this solid of basketball. Before we hop into it, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Help me push towards the 1,000 subscriber mark on the channel. About 30 subscribers away, trying to get this channel monetized. Would really appreciate it if y'all do subscribe. And without further ado, let's hop right into it and let's talk about it. So tonight's game, Vucevic goes 16 of 22 from the field, 2 of 6 from 3, 39 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists. Really, really impressive game. Ayo Dosunmu had one of the better games of his career as well. 9 of 13, made all 3 of his threes. 10 rebounds, 11 assists, 27 points. I shouldn't say one of the better games of his career. He had the best game of his career tonight. So shout out Ayo Dosunmu for that. He's had a pretty solid year too, at least in some ways. We'll talk about him and some of these other Bulls young guys pretty soon. LaVine didn't have a super great game, but didn't need to with how great Vucevic and Ayo were. And to be fair, the Spurs without Wemby are not the same team that they are with Wemby. Plain and simple. Like, that's just a fact. I don't think there's really anybody particularly arguing that. But they are now 10-13. They are playing like pretty solid basketball. They're one of the better offensive teams in basketball. I don't know if they're one of the best offensive teams in basketball. Now, what they are is the fastest playing team in basketball, which is pretty fun to play. I mean, they're a fun team to watch. I will say that. They play super fast, but they play pretty much no defense, and they're only really overall a slightly above average offensive team, despite how ridiculously Vucevic is playing and how solidly LaVine is playing on the offensive end of the court, especially as well. So been really, really impressed with the Bulls' ability to be competitive. They've won 5 of their last 10 games. After tonight, they're very solidly in the play-in race in a very weak East. And it makes me wonder what the plan for this team is, because in my personal opinion, and in my expectation, you would think Vucevic and LaVine will both be traded. They've probably both honestly rehabilitated their trade value, at least to a certain extent. Vucevic probably more than LaVine, but still both those guys have proven to be very capable offensive players. And Vucevic is not only having a great year, he is having an all-NBA year. I mean, when you look at his numbers, he is averaging 21 and 10 on 58, 47 and a half from 3. Like, ridiculous levels of efficiency. His effective field goal percentage is literally 66, which is ridiculous. I mean, he's having an amazing, amazing year. His true shooting is 68%. Elite. Absolutely elite. He is having an incredible year, and he's doing it while shooting the 3 ball the best he ever has in his career by far, on almost 5 attempts a game, having himself a ridiculous season. And yet, when you look at this team, besides Vucevic and besides LaVine, who in his own right is having a very good year, shooting 43% from 3, averaging 22 points a game, besides those two guys, nobody else on this Bulls roster is having like an amazing year. Like, Kobe White's having a fine year, but he's doing it probably pretty similar to what he was doing last year. Josh Giddey still can't really shoot the 3 ball at a super high level, but he's a good playmaker, having a solid year, averaging about 12 a game. Ayo Dosunmu is having a decent year. He's a good defensive point guard. I think he's a defensive guard. I don't know if I would really consider him a point guard, but he's a good defensive guard. He does have some playmaking ability. He's a good player, but he can't shoot consistently. He's shooting 27% from 3 on 4 attempts a game. Not good enough there. And when you look at the other young guys on this team, Matas Buzelis has been better as of late, but does not look like he has had a great start. I mean, he really hasn't had a great start to his career at this point, shooting, 36% from 3 as of late, which is an improvement for sure, but 5 points a game, hasn't played a huge amount until recently. Good to see him improving, because it was really bad for the first month or so, but he hasn't been great. The other young guys, I mean, I'm not sure Dalen Terry, in all honesty, is ever going to develop into a true rotation player. Julian Phillips is an intriguing athlete and size guy on the perimeter, but I don't think he offensively is versatile and capable enough to really be a consistent, trustable rotation player. Patrick Williams is fine, but nothing special. Like, he's a good player, but I think he's overpaid, and he's certainly not great. And he's another guy who, by the way, I could also see getting traded at some point. Lonzo Ball has been bad and hasn't played much. I'm glad to see him back healthy, but it's going to take him a while to get back to NBA action at the level that he was at. And it remains to be seen, in all honesty, whether he can ever recapture quite close to the level of play that he was at prior to his injury for the Bulls back in 2021, I guess it was. And outside of that, like, who is the guy on this team? Like, THT's having a really good year. Is he all of a sudden going to emerge? Jalen Smith is kind of there. Like, he's not been awful, but I don't really know if I trust him as a rotation big on a good team. He's having a fine year, but when you go up and down this roster, outside of Levine and Vucevic, you have Kobe White and then a bunch of just like question mark type guys on this team. And it makes you wonder, look, if they traded Levine and Vucevic, they would be bad, like really bad. When you look at the standings right now, it's not like they're great. They trade Levine and Vucevic, they're going to be a bottom 5 team in the East. They're going to be a team that is in the running for that Cooper flag race. But the Wizards already have one of those top 4 worst records locked up. The Jazz, I think, pretty much all but have one locked up themselves. And that only leaves 2 other spots for teams that can get top chances, basically, percentage chance at Cooper flag, which makes you wonder, is this a team that maybe they decided to change course and not trade Vucevic and Levine? But then the question is, like, what is the plan if that's what you're going to do? Because going to the play-in and either losing in the first round of the playoffs or losing in the play-in does nothing for you. I don't see what the plan for this team is. If it was me, I would trade Levine and Vucevic, and I would trade it as soon as you could get some value for those guys, to be honest. Like, I think Vucevic actually has real value. I think there are playoff teams that would love to add him to their rotation, and he could be a really, really good big. But you also do have to wonder, to be completely honest, what the future for this team is, because there doesn't seem to be those young pieces to really build around besides Kobe White. And again, defensively, they are atrocious. One of the worst defensive teams in all of basketball. And so I'm struggling to understand what the plan is in Chicago. They've been surprising. They've been fun, but they're not particularly good. They're about average in a bad Eastern Conference, which puts them at bad overall. And it's just like, what does the future look like for the Warriors? I really don't know. I'm honestly kind of at a loss for what this Bulls team is going to look like. I think I just said Warriors. My apologies. I was watching the Warriors Rockets game. But anyways, I'm very confused by this team. I do think Vucevic and Levine will both get traded, but if they don't, I don't think that helps the Bulls, but I also wouldn't be shocked by it, because the Bulls have a history of not making trades when they should, to downgrade the roster over these past couple of years. I mean, they should have rebuilt a couple of years ago, realistically, and they just sat on a mediocre to bad roster for a couple of years and just let things fester. Haven't gotten noticeably better with the assets they have had. Just confused by the future and the plans for this team, for sure, is basically the point of this video. And it's going to be fascinating to see how the next couple months unfold for the Chicago Bulls. So with that being said, that is going to do it for today's video. I hope y'all did enjoy. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe, and I'll be back with more NBA content very, very soon. Appreciate y'all. Peace.